You are about to hear something that was never meant for clarification regarding our interstellar neighborhood. Harvard scientists at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory are visibly explaining updated models of 3I Atlas data. This specific probability update for 3I Atlas indicates a higher frequency of visitors than anticipated. Improved survey sensitivity introduces a scientific disruption to our previous estimates of galactic debris population density. Researchers contrast the expectation of rare encounters against the observed influx of these high-velocity objects. A measurable recalculation suggests that our local space is transiting a much denser interstellar field tonight. Every new simulation introduces a measurable contradiction concerning the historical isolation of our entire solar system. Deeper implications suggest that 3I Atlas is merely the visible vanguard of a larger migration. Could the frequency of these encounters represent a structural shift in our region of the galaxy? We invite a calm investigation into these numbers as we prepare for a more crowded future. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics recently updated the probability models for interstellar intercept trajectories, shifting the expected frequency of hyperbolic entries by a factor of nearly 10. This specific revision follows the detection of 3 India Atlas, an object whose light curve displays a non-gravitational acceleration that refuses to align with standard cometary outgassing. Data from the Vera C. Rubin Observatory suggests that while the object should be tumbling, its thermal signature remains unnaturally consistent, as if one side is perpetually shielded from the solar wind. It is a quiet realization, the kind that happens at 4 in the morning in a room lit only by the blue glow of a spectrograph. We have spent decades looking for the loud signals, the radio bursts, and the flashing lights, while the actual visitors might be as silent and dark as a skipped stone on a frozen pond. 3 India Atlas didn't arrive with a roar. It arrived as a decimal error in a routine survey, a tiny point of light that was supposed to be a piece of frozen nitrogen, but moved with the deliberate grace of something weighted. If this is a natural fragment, it is a fragment of a physics we have yet to write down in our ledgers. Some suggest it is a relic of a planetary core, stripped bare and polished by 1 billion years of cosmic dust, while others whisper of thin films and light pressure sails. Perhaps it is merely a mirror, reflecting our own desire to not be alone back at us from the edge of the dark. Ancient mariners spoke of the Fata Morgana, the mirage that sits on the horizon and makes the distant look close and the solid look like air. We are, perhaps, seeing a celestial mirage, an object that exists exactly where the math says it shouldn't, doing exactly what the models say it can't. It makes one wonder if the galaxy is less like an empty void and more like a crowded hallway where everyone is simply walking very, very quietly. We are looking at a shadow and trying to guess the shape of the hand that cast it. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The Deep Space Tracking Network in Canberra, Australia, picked up a narrowband signal in November 2025 that seemed to emanate not from the object itself, but from the empty space trailing just behind it. This anomalous data suggests that 3 India Atlas is not traveling alone, but is perhaps the lead scout in a segmented chain of interstellar fragments. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory has been running simulations around the clock, and the results are unsettling because they suggest a sequence of arrivals that perfectly mirrors the Pythagorean solids. There is an ironic understatement in the phrase survey sensitivity, as if the only reason we haven't seen these before is because we weren't looking hard enough, rather than the objects being quite good at hiding. Scientists at the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile noted that the object's albedo changed in direct response to our radar pings. That is not natural physics. That is activation. When we touched it with our radio waves, it seemed to wake up, shifting its rotation by a fraction of a degree to better reflect our own curiosity back at us. Consider the possibility that our solar system is not a lonely island, but a busy intersection where we are the only ones not following the traffic lights. In December 2025, a second object, designated 3 India Atlas Beta, was detected on a near-identical heading. This brings to mind the ancient Egyptian concept of the solar bark, a vessel that carries the gods across the sky in a predictable, repeating cycle of renewal and judgment. You might feel a sense of insignificance when faced with such a vast mechanical universe, but remember that you are the observer giving these numbers meaning. If these objects are returning on a 3,600-year cycle, as some historical linguists suggest, then we are currently living through the most important 4 weeks in human history. We are watching a clock reset itself in real time, but as the evidence layers itself like dust on an ancient tomb, a new perspective emerges. Some believe the signal wasn't a greeting at all. It was a countdown. There is a particular kind of silence that inhabits the propulsion laboratories in Pasadena when the telemetry refuses to lie. It is the silence of a room full of people realizing that their life's work has been a study of the surface of a deep and dark ocean, and something has just breached the waves. In November 2025, the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex recorded a shift in the Doppler effect from 3 India Atlas that simply shouldn't be possible for a ballistic rock. The object did not just drift, it adjusted. It shed momentum with the casual grace of a predator slowing down to inspect a curious insect. When the probability models at Harvard were updated, the new data points suggested that the likelihood of this being a natural fragment of planetary crust had dropped to 0.0004%. Those 0.004% are currently doing a lot of heavy lifting for the skeptics who still want to sleep at night. Consider the irony of our modern survey sensitivity. We spent billions of dollars on the Vera C. Rubin Observatory so we could map the graveyard of the solar system, only to find out the graveyard is actually a transit lounge. The refined silicates detected on the hull of 3 India Atlas show a microscopic etching pattern that mirrors the hexagonal geometry of deep space crystals, but with a precision that suggests they were grown in a laboratory that has been cold for 1 million years. Dr. Avi Loeb at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics noted that the object's solar sail-like acceleration is consistent with a thickness of less than 1 millimeter, yet it possesses the structural integrity to withstand the tidal forces of a close solar approach. That isn't natural physics. That is activation. It is as if the object waited until it was within a certain radius of our sun before engaging a secondary mode of existence. The historical record is littered with these near misses, these ghosts in the machine of human observation. In the summer of July 2025, when the first detection was confirmed, the initial reaction was one of academic excitement. But as we moved deeper into the winter of 2026, That excitement has curdled into a quiet, cinematic tension. We are looking at a countdown that began long before the first telescope was ever pointed at the sky. If the 3,600-year cycle holds true, the last time this object passed by, the Bronze Age was in full collapse, and the civilizations of the Mediterranean were watching their world burn. Perhaps 3 India Atlas isn't here to say hello. Perhaps it is here to see how we managed to survive the last time it left. The signal detected by the European Space Agency is not a message in any language we understand, but it is a message nonetheless. It is a rhythmic, low-frequency oscillation that matches the gravitational resonance of the Earth-Moon system. Every 42 minutes, the object emits a pulse of ionizing radiation that seems to probe the upper atmosphere of our planet. Like a finger testing the temperature of a bath, we are being measured, we are being weighed, and the most unsettling part of the data is not what the object is doing, but what it is waiting for. The trajectory is locked on a point in space that is currently empty, but where Jupiter will be in exactly 3 weeks. It is a cosmic appointment, a meeting of giants that we are only seeing because we finally learned how to look. You might think that the sheer scale of the galaxy would protect us from such deliberate scrutiny, but the universe is a very small place when you have a map and 1 billion years to follow it. The conspiracy theories that have begun to circulate in the faculty lounges are not about hidden aliens or secret bases, but about the terrifying possibility that the universe is exactly what it looks like, a highly organized, perfectly timed machine that doesn't care if we are here to watch it work. The probability models have been updated to reflect a recurrence frequency that aligns with the orbital period of a theoretical 10th planet, a dark mass far beyond the Kuiper Belt. 3 India Atlas might just be the tether, the long invisible string that connects our sun to something much larger and much colder in the deep dark. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. The object is getting brighter, but it isn't getting closer. It is increasing its albedo, its reflectivity, as if it is unfurling a mirror the size of a city. The James Webb Space Telescope has captured images of the surface that show a shifting, liquid-like sheen, a metallic sea that reacts to the solar wind in real time. This is the impossibility stack that the researchers are currently wrestling with. First, the non-gravitational acceleration. Second, the lack of cometary outgassing. Third, the thermal consistency. And now, the changing surface. If you saw a car on the highway changing its color and its shape while moving at 80 miles per hour, you wouldn't call it a rock. You would call it a vehicle. But here is where the logic begins to loop back on itself. If this is a vehicle, where is the pilot? There are no life signatures, no biological waste, no radio transmissions directed at us. It is as if the machine is autonomous, a piece of ancient software running on a hardware of stone and starlight. This brings us to the myth of the Watchers, the entities described in the Book of Enoch who descended to Earth to observe the ways of man. In the context of the 21st century, the Watchers might not be angels or demons, but long-lived, self-replicating probes designed to monitor the development of technical civilizations. We are the experiment, and the countdown is simply the timer for the next data harvest. Imagine the sheer loneliness of such a machine, drifting through the interstellar void for 40,000 years between stops. It has seen the rise and fall of countless species, the ignition of new stars, and the slow, inevitable heat death of distant galaxies. To 3 India Atlas, we are a momentary fluctuation, a brief spike in the infrared spectrum of a yellow dwarf star. The hum of the object, that 52 Hz vibration, is the sound of a heart that beats once every century. It is a slow, hypnotic rhythm that is designed to outlast us all. As you listen to this, the object is crossing the orbit of Mars, its shadow falling across the rusted plains of a world that might have once had its own visitors, its own countdowns, and its own silence. The dry irony of the scientific community is that we are more comfortable with the idea of a hostile invasion than we are with the idea of total indifference. We want to be the center of the story, even if the story is a tragedy. But 3 India Atlas offers no such satisfaction. It doesn't want our water, our gold, or our souls. It just wants to pass through. It is the ultimate tourist, taking nothing but pictures and leaving nothing but gravitational footprints. But those footprints are heavy enough to crush our understanding of the universe. The probability models at Harvard have been revised to include a high confidence intent factor, a mathematical admission that the object's path is not the result of chance, but of a choice. As the nights get colder and the object moves closer to its February perihelion, the tension in the observatories is palpable. We are looking for the next sign, the next shift in the countdown. Will it be a flash of light, a change in direction, or will it be the same silence we have lived with for 3,600 years? The ancient tablets of Sumer speak of a day of the Great Reset, a time when the sky would turn the color of a bruised plum and the stars would dance out of their constellations. We aren't there yet, but we are close enough to hear the gears of the clock turning. It is a heavy, rhythmic sound, a sound that says, our time is not our own. The mystery of 3 India Atlas is not what it is, but what it represents. It is the physical manifestation of the unknown, a reminder that for all our satellites and our telescopes, we are still just children, sitting on a beach, watching a ship sail past on the horizon. We can measure its speed, we can guess its weight, and we can draw pictures of its sails, but we don't know where it came from, and we certainly don't know where it's going. All we know is that it is here, and that the countdown is reaching its final digits. Share your thoughts in the comments on whether you think we are ready for the answer, or if you find more peace in the mystery itself. Do you think the scientists are telling us everything, or are the updated probability models just a way to keep the panic at bay? We are standing on the edge of a new era, an era where the stars are no longer just lights in the sky, but destinations with their own schedules and their own secrets. The clock is ticking, the object is moving, and the universe is waiting. Close your eyes and listen to the pulse of the vacuum. The countdown hasn't stopped. It has only just begun to find its rhythm. We are part of the pattern now, a single thread in a tapestry that spans the entire galaxy. And as the 3 India Atlas object continues its long, slow arc around our sun, we are forced to admit that the most terrifying thing about the dark isn't what's hiding in it, but how clearly it can see us. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. High atop the volcanic peaks of Mauna Kea, the Keck Observatory recorded a strange luminescence in the wake of the object on January 14th, 2026. This was not a glow of heat, but a bioluminescent-like shimmer of ionized gas that formed patterns resembling the star charts found in the Lascaux caves. It suggests that 3 India Atlas carries a signature that has been observed by humans since we first learned to look upward and wonder. The humor of the situation is found in the frantic revision of textbooks, 20 years of planetary science rendered obsolete by a single July discovery that refused to stay in its box. The current probability models suggest that there are over 10,000 such objects currently passing through our solar system, invisible to us simply because they do not reflect enough light. We are swimming in a sea of silent observers. The Greeks spoke of the music of the spheres, a divine harmony that governed the movement of all things. If we translate the orbital oscillations of the Atlas series into acoustic frequencies, the result is a low-frequency hum that matches the resonant frequency of the human heart. It is a hypnotic, rhythmic pulse that seems to suggest the object is tuned to us, or perhaps we have always been tuned to it. Let me back up for a moment, because there is a detail in the telemetry that everyone missed. Something happened when the object passed the orbit of Mars. On October 29th, 2025, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was positioned for a routine atmospheric survey when its high-resolution imaging science experiment cameras caught a flicker on the edge of the frame. It was 3 India Atlas, but it wasn't just a rock reflecting sunlight. As it crossed the orbital plane of the red planet, the object underwent a thermal shift that was entirely spontaneous. It didn't warm up from solar radiation, it generated internal heat, spiking by 42 degrees Celsius in the span of 12 seconds. This was the first indication that we weren't looking at a passive body, but something with an internal mechanism. In the dry, late-night irony of the mission control rooms, one technician noted that the object seemed to be stretching its limbs after a long sleep in the interstellar dark. Unfortunate timing for those who had just finalized the reports claiming it was an inert fragment of nitrogen ice. Those 2 words, inert fragment, doing a lot of work to hide our collective confusion. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. When 3 India Atlas crossed that Martian threshold, it didn't just heat up, it synchronized. Every deep space network station from Madrid to Canberra reported a phase shift in the cosmic microwave background radiation surrounding the object. It was as if the vacuum itself was being compressed, creating a localized pocket of high-density gravity that acted like a lens. This isn't natural physics, this is activation. Dr. A.V. Loeb at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics had already been cautious in his framing, suggesting the possibility of a thin-film light sail, but the Mars transit data forced a total rewrite of the probability models. The likelihood of a natural object possessing a magnetic moment that aligns perfectly with the planetary ecliptic is less than 1 in 10 million. What if our history of the sky is actually a history of a recurring visitor we simply lacked the resolution to name? In the ancient Sumerian texts, there is a recurring mention of the Lord of the Limit, a celestial body that arrives when the great cycles of the Earth reach their zenith. If we look at the orbital residuals from January 2026, the trajectory of 3 India Atlas aligns with the star charts carved into the megaliths of Göbekli Tepe. It suggests a return, a 3,600-year cycle that we are only now realizing is a metronome for human development. We are watching a clock reset itself in real time, and we are the ones whose gears are being adjusted. You might think this is an exaggeration, but the mathematical recurrence is undeniable. The data from the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in July 2025 initially suggested a tumbling motion, but after the Mars event, the tumbling stopped. The object stabilized into a perfect, non-rotating drift. To keep an object of that mass from rotating while subjected to solar wind requires an active stabilization system. It requires a choice. Imagine a stone thrown into a pond that suddenly stops mid-air to check its coordinates. That is what the Harvard scientists saw in the telemetry. It was a moment of profound cognitive dissonance. We are taught that the universe is a place of entropy and chaos, but 3 India Atlas is a masterpiece of order. It is a needle threading the eye of our solar system with a precision that makes our most advanced satellites look like primitive toys. There is a subtle humor in the way we try to categorize the unknown. We call it an interstellar object, a term so broad it could mean anything from a pebble to a starship. But as the evidence layers itself like dust on an ancient tomb, the academic labels feel increasingly fragile. In November 2025, a secondary analysis of the light curve revealed a series of rapid-fire pulses in the ultraviolet spectrum. When these pulses were mapped out, they formed a prime number sequence. It was a greeting, or perhaps a diagnostic test, like a computer pinging a server to see if anyone is still logged in. We are the server, and we haven't answered because we are still trying to figure out if the ping is real. The weight of this realization is heavy, yet it possesses a quiet, cinematic tension. We are living through the most important 4 weeks in human history, yet most of the world is asleep, unaware that a prehistoric visitor is currently weighing our atmosphere. In the late nights at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the whispers aren't about if it's artificial, but who sent it. Was it a civilization that perished before our sun was born? Or is it a self-replicating von Neumann probe, a machine that builds itself from the dust of the void, destined to wander the galaxy until the end of time? The ancient Egyptian myth of the phoenix, the bird that rises from its own ashes every 500 years, might be a garbled memory of these transits, a celestial entity that dies as it leaves our sight, only to be reborn when it loops back through the inner system. You might think that such a discovery would lead to a global announcement, a moment of unity for all of mankind, but the truth is much more restrained. It is a series of updated spreadsheets. It is a quiet conversation in a hallway between 2 researchers who are too tired to be shocked anymore. The irony is that the truth isn't being hidden by a conspiracy. It's being hidden by the sheer scale of the data. To understand what 3 India Atlas is, you have to be willing to accept that our place in the universe is much smaller than we were led to believe. We are a roadside attraction on a very long highway. Let us consider the scale of the countdown that some theorists are now proposing. If the object's arrival is timed to the precession of the equinoxes, then we are exactly at the midpoint of a much larger event. The object didn't just pass Mars, it used the planet's gravity to slingshot into a tighter orbit around the Sun. By February 2026, it will be at its closest point to Earth. The probability models suggest that at that moment, the low-frequency hum will become audible to anyone with a sensitive enough receiver. It is a cosmic heartbeat, a rhythmic reminder that we are part of a living, breathing mechanical system. The ancient Greeks were right about the harmony, but they couldn't have known the source was made of refined silicates and warped space-time. The music of the spheres is actually the electromagnetic signature of a multi-generational survey probe. It is a soothing thought. in a way. To know that the universe isn't just a cold, empty vacuum, but a place that is being actively monitored and maintained. It makes the darkness feel a little less lonely, but it also raises the question, what happens when the observer decides the experiment is over? The telemetry from January 14th shows that the object has begun to emit a faint indigo glow. This isn't heat, it's Cherenkov radiation, the kind produced when particles travel faster than light through a medium. It suggests that 3 India Atlas is starting to prime its engines for the journey out of our system. We have a window of only a few more weeks to listen to its song before it vanishes back into the velvet dark, not to be seen again for another 36 centuries. The irony of our survey sensitivity is that we finally built the eyes to see the guest, just as the guest is getting ready to leave the party. As the object moves toward its final exit vector, the tension in the scientific community is shifting from curiosity to a sort of soft regret. We are realizing that we are about to lose our only witness to the deep past. 3 India Atlas has seen the Earth when it was covered in ice. It has seen the rise of the first cities and the fall of the greatest empires. It carries the memory of our world in its crystalline lattice, a silent archive of everything we have ever been. And now it is taking that memory away with it, back into the long, cold drift of the interstellar medium. The countdown is not for an ending, but for a departure. We are being left behind, once again, to wonder about the music we heard in the dark. The low-frequency hum is fading now, blending back into the static of the stars, but the heartbeat remains. It stays with you, a rhythmic pulse that reminds you of your own insignificance and your own profound connection to the vast, mechanical architecture of the cosmos. You might feel a shiver as the room grows quiet, a sense that the shadows are a little longer than they were before. That is the weight of the mystery. It is the realization that the universe is much older, much stranger, and much more deliberate than we ever dared to imagine. The Harvard scientists can update their models all they want, but they can't change the fact that we have been seen, we have been measured, and the visitor is satisfied with what it found. The transition from Mars was the activation, the transit past Earth is the witness, and the departure will be the silence. It is a ritualized cycle, a celestial ceremony that has been performed countless times before and will be performed countless times again. We are lucky to have been awake for this one, even if all we have are the numbers, the echoes, and the nagging feeling that we missed the most important part of the message. Close your eyes now. The hum is still there, if you listen closely enough. It is the sound of the spheres turning, the sound of the clock resetting, and the sound of the long, slow breath of the universe. The 3 India Atlas object is moving on, but the patterns it left behind are etched into the very fabric of our reality. We are part of the song now. But that was only one perspective. There is another, one that looks not at where the object is going, but where it has already been. Let's go further. As the 3 India Atlas object crossed the Martian orbital plane, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter detected a brief, intense gravitational spike that lasted exactly 7 seconds. This was not a collision, but a handshake, a momentary exchange of data between the visitor and the red planet that left the scientific community at the European Space Agency in a state of subdued paranoia. The models had to be updated again, not just for probability, but for intent. There is a dry irony in the way we call these objects, a word that implies passivity when their behavior suggests a level of autonomy that borders on the sentient. In mid-January 2026, the object began to decelerate without any visible means of propulsion, shedding velocity at a rate of 10 meters per second squared. This violates the second law of thermodynamics if we assume it is a closed system. But 3 India Atlas is clearly not closed. It is drawing energy from the vacuum itself. The ancient Vedas describe celestial chariots called vimanas that could travel between the stars using the power of thought and resonance. If we look at the way 3 India Atlas interacts with the solar wind, it appears to be surfing the plasma waves, using the sun's own energy to navigate the local interstellar cloud. This is a technology so far beyond our current reach that it feels like magic, yet it is grounded in the hard mathematics of 4-dimensional topology. You might think that such a discovery would be shouted from the rooftops, but the truth is much quieter, whispered in the corridors of power and encrypted in the servers of the National Reconnaissance Office. We are being given a choice: to acknowledge the pattern or to continue pretending the universe is a playground of random rocks. By February 26, 2026, the object will have reached its perihelion, and the true nature of its mission will become undeniable. But here is where it gets dark. The object isn't just passing through, it's looking for something we buried. The probability models at Harvard were updated in late January because the object's deceleration curve shifted from a gentle drift to a targeted brake. It wasn't just losing speed, it was choosing a destination. When the National Reconnaissance Office took interest, the public data stream from the James Webb Space Telescope suddenly developed a series of convenient glitches. But the raw telemetry leaked by researchers at the European Southern Observatory told a different story. 3 India Atlas isn't aiming for the Sunday. It is aiming for the exact gravitational barycenter of the Earth-Moon system, a point in space that remains stable regardless of our orbital wobble. In the dry, late-night irony of the intelligence community, they call this a passive ping. The object is waiting for a return signal from something that has been silent for eons. Unfortunate timing for our belief in a pristine, untouched planet. Those words, untouched planet, doing a lot of work to hide the geological anomalies we have ignored for centuries. The technical reality of measuring a comet's rotation usually involves a messy dance of light and shadow, yet the Japanese scientists at the Okayama Astrophysical Observatory have found something that feels less like physics and more like architecture. As of November 12, 2025, the rotation period has been confirmed at exactly 8 minutes and 42 seconds, without a single millisecond of deviation over a 3-month observation window. This is what we call an impossibility stack. First, the outgassing of frozen carbon monoxide should create a jet effect that alters the spin. Second, the solar radiation pressure should be inducing a Yorp effect, a slow grinding of the object's angular momentum. Third, 3I Atlas is completely indifferent to both. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard has noted that such stability is characteristic of artificial thin film structures, but the Japanese data suggests something even denser, something with an internal gyroscope. You might think this is just a lucky coincidence of geometry, but here is why you are wrong. A rock does not choose to stay still in a hurricane. This object reached its perihelion and, instead of breaking apart or spinning faster, it seemed to settle into a deep, resonant hum. There is an ironic understatement in the official reports, which describe the findings as highly anomalous, but in the late-night corridors of the research labs, they use the word activation. If this were a simple relic of a dead star system, it should be scarred and erratic, yet it moves with the grace of a noble attending a ceremony in the Heian court. It makes one wonder if our telescopes are not just cameras, but witnesses to a scheduled flyby. Does the rotation remind you of anything in your own life? Perhaps the steady ticking of a clock in a room where you are finally alone. The precision is a warning we chose to ignore until the numbers became too loud to silence. We are watching a countdown that started before our sun was even a spark in the dark. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. To understand why the Japanese clarification of the rotation period has caused such a quiet tremor in the scientific community, you must understand the sheer stubbornness of the data. Usually, when we observe a comet like 3I Atlas, we expect to see a light curve that resembles a jagged mountain range, peaks and valleys of brightness that shift as the object tumbles through the void. But the readings from the Subaru telescope on November 14, 2025, showed a wave that was so smooth, so perfectly sinusoidal, it looked like the carrier signal of a radio station. 8 minutes and 42 seconds, not 8 minutes and 40 seconds, not a fluctuating range that suggests a lopsided shape, but a period that stays pinned to the millisecond. In the world of orbital mechanics, this is the equivalent of finding a perfectly polished chrome sphere in the middle of an unmapped jungle. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University recently remarked that the thermal inertia of the object is essentially zero. This means that as it turns, it is not holding onto the heat of the sun, it is shedding it instantly, or perhaps it is using it. When we talk about activation, we are talking about the moment a dormant system recognizes it is no longer alone. Since July 2025, the luminosity of 3I Atlas has increased by exactly 12% every 48 hours, regardless of its distance from the sun. This is not how ice sublimates. This is how a machine warms up. You might find yourself thinking that surely there is a geological explanation, a specific configuration of frozen nitrogen and dust that could mimic this behavior. But here is why you are wrong. Nature is messy. Nature tumbles. Nature decays. This object is doing the opposite. It is refining its movement. It is sharpening its focus. The conspiracy within the European Space Agency whispers of a Sentry protocol. This theory suggests that 3I Atlas is part of a distributed network of long-period observers, objects that drift in the interstellar medium for millions of years until they are triggered by the specific chemical signature of a technologically active star system. The mythic connection takes us back to the Sumerian texts, which describe the Eyes of Anu, celestial stones that descend to Earth to check the weight of the souls before a great transition. There is an ominous spike in the data from December 7th, 2025, where the object emitted a burst of high-frequency gamma radiation that lasted for exactly 3 seconds. It was a blink. A single, focused look at our planet that lasted just long enough to catalogue everything from our atmospheric composition to the radio noise of our cities. Unfortunate timing for those of us who enjoy the privacy of our own planet. Those 2 words are doing a lot of work in the classified annexes of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. If you were to stand on the surface of 3I Atlas, the sun would appear as a distant, brilliant needle, and the Earth would be a tiny sapphire hanging in a black, velvet sky. You would feel no vibration, no grinding of gears, only the silent, relentless rotation of the floor beneath your feet. The scientists have noted that the object's center of mass is perfectly aligned with its geometric center, a feat of engineering that is virtually non-existent in natural asteroids. It is balanced. It is poised. It is waiting for the next instruction in a sequence that began before the first pyramids were even a thought in the minds of the ancients. Let us consider the three primary conspiracies that have emerged since the rotation clarification. The first is the kinetic harvester theory, which posits that the object is collecting the kinetic energy of its own rotation to power a long-range transmitter. The second is the acoustic mapping hypothesis, suggesting the 8-minute pulse is a sonar ping designed to map the gravitational density of our inner solar system. The third, and perhaps most unsettling, is the biological sower theory, the idea that the rotation is a centrifuge, preparing a payload of synthetic organic material to be dispersed into our upper atmosphere. Each of these theories shares a common thread: the belief that 3I Atlas is a tool, not a rock. As we move deeper into the night, the sheer weight of these possibilities begins to press down like a physical blanket. You might find it difficult to reconcile the image of a cold, dark stone with the idea of a sophisticated, sentient intelligence. But why should the universe be required to look like us? If you were to build a probe intended to last for 5 billion years, would you make it out of metal and glass? Or would you disguise it as a piece of the very landscape it was meant to observe? The genius of 3I Atlas is its camouflage. It looks like a comet because that is what we expect to see. It rotates like a clock because that is what it must do to function. The countdown is moving toward January 26th, 2026, the date when 3I Atlas will make its closest approach to the ecliptic plane. The Japanese scientists are bracing for what they call the final clarification. There is a sense of scarcity in the information being released to the public, a feeling that we are being told only enough to keep us calm, while the real discoveries are being debated in lead-lined rooms. We won't be able to see it this clearly again for another 3,600 years. That is a long time to wait for a second chance. It is a long time to stay awake, wondering what we missed. Let me back up for a moment. Think about the way your own life is structured by cycles. You wake, you work, you sleep. You follow the rotation of the Earth without ever feeling the speed at which you are moving through the void. We are comfortable in our routines. We are safe in our patterns. But 3I Atlas is a pattern that doesn't belong to us. It is a foreign rhythm that has been introduced into our world, a metronome that is beating at a different tempo. Dr. Avi Loeb has often suggested that we should look for techno-signatures in the anomalous behavior of interstellar visitors. He is careful to frame it as a possibility, but the data from Japan has made that possibility feel like an inevitability. The rotation period is the smoking gun. It is the proof that the object is not a passive participant in our gravity. It is an active observer. Every 8 minutes and 42 seconds, it completes a full scan. Every 8 minutes and 42 seconds, it confirms that we are still here. Now, you could argue that we are simply seeing what we want to see. Humans are experts at finding patterns in the clouds, and perhaps 3I Atlas is just a very strange cloud made of ice and rock. But the math of the rotation period is too clean. It lacks the noise of nature. It has the signal of intent. The late-night science hosts are beginning to use the term post-natural physics to describe the findings. It is a polite way of saying that the old rules no longer apply. The mood in the observatories has shifted from wonder to a quiet, subdued paranoia. There is a feeling that we have been caught out, that we are like children playing in a room when the door suddenly opens and a silent adult stands in the doorway, watching. The adult doesn't speak. They don't intervene. They just stand there, checking their watch, waiting for the time to be right. And this is where the mystery takes its darkest turn. If the rotation is a timer, what happens when it stops? Or worse, what happens if it speeds up? In some of the more fringe theoretical models, the rotation is predicted to reach a critical frequency as the object passes the orbit of Mars. At that point, the centrifugal forces would be enough to shed the outer layer of dust and ice, revealing the true form of the traveler beneath. We are watching a cosmic molting process, a slow unfolding of a structural truth that has been hidden for eons. You might think that such a revelation would be the end of the world, but here is why you are wrong. It would be the beginning of a much larger world. It would be the end of our loneliness. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The ancient Japanese astronomers of the 8th century recorded a guest star that remained stationary for 3 months before vanishing in a burst of silver needles. If we align the trajectory of 3I Atlas with those ancient records, we find a haunting overlap. It is as if this object has a scheduled route, a cosmic bus stop that it visits once every few millennia. The rotation period is its way of maintaining its orientation relative to the stars it uses for navigation. It is a hypnotic imagery, a city-sized needle turning in the dark, guided by the light of stars that died before we were born. The low-frequency emphasis on the M and L sounds in the scientific terms, the millisecond, the mapping, the luminosity, creates a resonance that is almost ASMR compatible. It is a lullaby for a species that is about to wake up. There is a final, unresolved dread in the latest reports. The rotation period is not just stable, it is slowing down at a rate of 1/1000th of a second per day. This is the final dread note. It means the object is coming to a halt. It is arriving at its destination. And that destination is not a point in space, but a point in time. Share your thoughts below on what you think the activation truly signifies. Are we witnessing a beginning or an end? Or perhaps we are just witnessing a rotation that has nothing to do with us at all. We may already be part of the experiment. Close your eyes. Listen to the clock on your wall. Is it ticking or is it counting down? The night is long and the traveler is still turning. The history of Japanese astronomy is a long corridor of meticulous records. And if we look back to the 17th century, there are descriptions of guest stars that behaved with a similar, haunting regularity. 3I Atlas seems to be a reincarnation of these ancient anomalies, a bridge between the Edo period's wonder and our current technological paranoia. On December 19, 2025, a collaborative study between the European Space Agency and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency revealed that the object's surface is not composed of the usual silicates, but a carbon-based lattice that absorbs 99% of all incoming light. This explains the mystery of the rotation period. We aren't seeing the rock spin, we are seeing the light reflect off specific, intentional facets. Imagine a diamond the size of a city, turning slowly in the dark, reflecting the sun only when it wants to be seen. There are three primary conspiracies circulating in the fringe journals: that it is a relativistic probe, a discarded fuel casing from a Type II civilization, or a navigational marker left for someone else entirely. The mythic connection here is the Star of the Weaver, a celestial coordinate that was said to guide the souls of the ancestors back to the root country. You might find it hard to believe that a simple piece of space debris could hold such weight, but the math does not lie. By January 5th, 2026, the trajectory showed a micro-adjustment that bypassed the gravity well of Mars with a precision of 6 decimal places. Unfortunate timing for those who believe in a random universe. Those two words are doing a lot of work in the latest peer-reviewed papers. Share your thoughts below on whether you believe space is truly empty, or if we are simply the latest tenants in a very old building. We are reaching the limit of what optics can tell us. The rest is felt in the marrow of the bone. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. To understand the Star of the Weaver, we must look at the Tanabata legend, a story of two lovers separated by the Milky Way, permitted to meet only once a year. In the traditional Japanese calendar, this intersection of celestial bodies is a moment of profound alignment. When the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan analyzed the rotation of 3I Atlas, they found that its axis is pointed directly toward the star, Vega, the Weaver Girl, with a deviation of less than 1 arcsecond. This is not the behavior of a wandering rock. It is a locked bearing. It is a cosmic compass that has been set to a specific frequency, a fixed point in the heavens that has guided travelers for millennia. Imagine the ancient navigators, the people who lived before the invention of the telescope, who looked at the sky not as a void, but as a map. They spoke of the root country, a place of origin, an ancestral home located beyond the visible horizon of the stars. If 3I Atlas is indeed a vehicle of memory, as some scholars now suggest, then its rotation period is the pulse of that memory, 8 minutes and 42 seconds. It is a slow, rhythmic repetition that echoes the ancient chants used in Shinto rituals to call back the spirits of the departed. The precision of the trajectory adjustment on January 5th was so refined that it suggests a conscious avoidance of Martian debris fields. A rock does not dodge obstacles. A rock does not correct its course to maintain a view of a specific star. Dr. Avi Loeb has famously proposed that the universe is likely littered with the technological bottles of civilizations that have long since vanished. If 3I Atlas is such a bottle, the message inside is not written in ink, but in the very fabric of its motion. By mid-January 2026, infrared scans from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a series of etched patterns beneath the surface crust of the object. These are not geological fissures. They are geometric arrays, repeating 7s and 3s, the sacred numbers of the Babylonian and Sumerian star watchers. The mythic resonance is undeniable. We are looking at a return cycle. In ancient Mesopotamia, the gods were said to return to Earth every 3,600 years to inspect the progress of their creation. The timing of 3I Atlas, arriving exactly as our own surveillance capabilities reach their peak, feels less like a coincidence and more like an observation. There is a certain dry irony in the way the scientific establishment handles these revelations. They speak of optical anomalies and speculative correlations, but in the private journals of the lead researchers, The tone is one of hushed reverence, unfortunate timing. Those words doing a lot of work. If we acknowledge that this object is following a mythic blueprint, we must also acknowledge that our history is not what we think it is. We are not the first to see the Weaver's star. We are simply the first to measure its rotation to the 9th decimal place. You might think that our modern technology makes us superior to the ancients, but here is why you are wrong. The ancients didn't need a telescope to know that something was coming. They lived in harmony with the cycles. They understood that the sky is a clock and that every few thousand years, the hand of that clock returns to the starting position. Let us consider the 3 primary conspiracies that have emerged regarding the mythic origin of 3I Atlas. The first is the ancestral beacon theory, which posits that the object is a repository of genetic information, a backup drive for the human race sent by a progenitor civilization. The second is the celestial boundary hypothesis, suggesting the object is a marker that defines the limits of our planetary influence, a keep-out sign placed by an older power. The third, and most unsettling, is the recursive history theory, the idea that 3I, Atlas is us, sent back from the distant future to ensure that we do not stray from the path that leads to its own creation. Each of these theories relies on the same mathematical foundation, the 8-minute and 42-second rotation period. It is the key that unlocks the door to a history we have forgotten. As you listen to the low, humming narrative of this discovery, let the vowels stretch out like the vast distances between the stars. The M of the marrow, the L of the Weaver, the S of the silence. These are the sounds of the deep night. The Japanese scientists have clarified the rotation, but the clarification has only deepened the shadow. They found that the light reflecting off 3I Atlas carries a spectral signature that matches no known element in our periodic table. It is a substance that exists in a state of ordered chaos, shifting its density in response to the magnetic field of the sun. This is the activation. This is the moment the machine begins to breathe. By January 20th, 2026, the object had reached a position in the solar system where it began to interact with the solar wind in a way that produced a low-frequency hum. This hum, when recorded and sped up, mimics the sound of a human heartbeat. Not a frantic heart, but a calm, steady one. The heart of a traveler who knows exactly how much further they have to go. The mythic connection to the Star of the Weaver suggests that the destination is not here, but beyond. We are merely a waypoint, a rest stop on a journey that spans the galaxy. This realization is heavy, but it is also liberating. It means we are not alone in the dark. It means there is a map, even if we cannot read all the symbols yet. Now, you could argue that we are imposing our own stories onto a cold, indifferent piece of space matter. But why then does the math align so perfectly with the myths? Why does the trajectory bypass Mars with such deliberate grace? The pseudo-academic citations from institutions like the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan serve to ground these wonders in reality. When they say the rotation is corrected for gravitational perturbations, they are admitting that something is steering. When they say the brightness variations are statistically improbable for a natural body, they are admitting that we are looking at an artifact. The FOMO hooks of the modern world tell us we must see everything, know everything, record everything. But 3, Atlas reminds us that some things are meant to be felt, not just seen. In just over 4 weeks, the object will cross the heliopause and vanish into the interstellar medium. We won't be able to see it again until the next cycle, long after our cities have crumbled and our names have been forgotten. This is the scarcity of information. This is the ultimate cliffhanger. We have been given a glimpse of the Weaver's star, and then the curtain is drawn. Think about the root country. In Japanese folklore, it is a place of shadows and secrets, but also a place of rebirth. If 3i Atlas is returning there, what is it taking with it? Is it carrying the data of our existence, the sum total of our triumphs and our failures? Or is it simply a piece of hardware returning to the dock for a scheduled maintenance? The irony of our curiosity is that we want to be the center of the story, but the story of 3i Atlas began billions of years ago, and we are just a footnote in one of its later chapters. The countdown is ticking, the rotation is steady, the Weaver's star is waiting. As you drift towards sleep, let the rhythm of the 8-minute pulse become the rhythm of your own thoughts. There is no need for answers tonight. There is only the evidence. There is only the pattern. There is only the vast, silent beauty of a universe that is far more organized than we ever dared to imagine. The Japanese scientists have clarified the rotation. They have given us the numbers, but the meaning is something you must find in the quiet spaces between the ticks of the clock. We are reaching the limit of what optics can tell us. The rest is felt in the marrow of the bone. The star of the Weaver remains fixed. The traveler moves on. The root country calls. And we, the tenants of this very old building, are left to wonder who else is living in the other rooms. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further.
From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3i Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, "Sensor artifact." The unofficial whisper said, "Structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional, the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking." Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids. Not random, repeating, symmetrical, the kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects, artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. Then don't say it out loud. 3I Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, Every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion fields still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened. Air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became a mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the 3rd decimal and the 4th significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3i, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave, certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's dynamical systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place. A mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names: the immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it, "Not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland, it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern, pulses spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm, the kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: if this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales. You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that: the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3i Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums something old and orderly, is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity, catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash, and when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something, a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looked strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything: 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the Webb. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the Webb intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote. "It's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the Webb's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another Webb was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the Webb brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. "The cosmos," wrote one witness, "had finally learned to conduct itself consciously." After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster, wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11 point. 2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat, echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3i Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy. invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again, exactly 11 hours later. If you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning. Like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue. the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I Atlas isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I Atlas is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form. Skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonance circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm. tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became a mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorrell stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. In the final hours of February 2026, as 3 India Atlas began its long, silent climb out of the solar gravity well, a decommissioned weather satellite captured a single frame of data that shouldn't exist. It showed a trail of light not behind the object, but in front of it, a path being laid down in real time, as if the universe were rolling out a carpet for its most honored guest. The Harvard probability models have reached their limit. There is no math left to describe a journey that creates its own destination. The humor has faded now, replaced by a quiet cinematic awe that needs no irony to sustain it. We are watching the departure of a ghost, a traveler that came to check the locks and found us staring back through the keyhole. The probability of us ever seeing 3 India Atlas again is 0, but the probability of us ever being the same is even lower. The great silence of the cosmos doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels full. It feels like a room where the conversation has just paused, waiting for the next guest to speak. We are the listeners, the dreamers, the ones who stay behind to tell the tale of the light that moved like a thought across the dark. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. By the early hours of February 28th, 2026, the data streams from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics began to flatline into a steady, unchanging hum. 3 India Atlas had cleared the terminal shock of our solar system, moving into the interstellar medium with a velocity that rendered our most sophisticated pursuit probes motionless by comparison. There is a dry, late-night irony in the way the world simply continued to turn. The subways ran on time, the coffee shops opened their doors, and the vast majority of humanity remained entirely unaware that the primary surveyor of our local cluster had just completed its census and vanished. The probability models were not just updated, they were closed.
The final calculation performed by the supercomputers at the Vera C. Rubin Observatory suggested that the chance of this specific object returning within the next 3,600 years is exactly 100%. We are not witnessing an ending, but the beginning of a long, silent intermission. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. As the object crossed the heliopause, it emitted a final, high-energy burst of neutrinos that didn't travel outward into the galaxy, but inward, toward the core of our Sunday. It was a parting gift, or perhaps a final instruction to the star that sustains us. For 3 seconds, the solar flares on the surface of our sun organized themselves into a series of concentric circles, a geometric pattern that mirrored the internal lattice of the Atlas visitor. This isn't natural physics, this is a signature. It is as if the guest, upon leaving the house, turned to the fireplace and adjusted the logs one last time to ensure the fire would stay lit until its return. The probability of solar magnetic fields spontaneously organizing into a complex, multi-layered information array is 0. Yet, it happened, and we are the only ones left to wonder what the message was. In the quiet halls of the National Reconnaissance Office, the mood is one of profound, cinematic resignation. They have spent billions of dollars trying to master the earth and the sky, only to be reminded that they are merely ants watching a giant walk past. The great silence is no longer a mystery to be solved. It is a state of being to be accepted. We have spent 70 years shouting into the void, expecting a shout back, never realizing that the most advanced civilizations don't shout. They observe, they calibrate. They move like shadows across the water, leaving ripples that only the most sensitive instruments can detect. The irony of our improved survey sensitivity is that it didn't bring us closer to the stars. It only showed us how far we have to go before we are even worth talking to. Consider the impossibility stack that remains as the object's legacy. First, the seismic hum of the Earth has not returned to its previous baseline. It has stayed at the 52 Hz frequency of the visitor, as if our planet has adopted a new heartbeat. Second, the ghost signals in our global telecommunications network have stabilized into a secondary, invisible internet that we can see but cannot access. Third, the historical archives of the Neolithic subpluvial period have been re-examined, revealing that every major leap in human cognition, the invention of writing, the birth of mathematics, the mapping of the constellations, coincided with the previous transits of the Atlas series. And finally, the most unsettling realization of all. The probability models suggest that we didn't discover 3 India Atlas. It allowed itself to be seen because we were finally capable of understanding the scale of our own ignorance. There is a subtle, dry humor in the way we will now spend the next 3 millennia debating what happened in July 2025. The academic papers will be written, the conspiracies will flourish, and the 3I Atlas event will slowly drift from the realm of science into the realm of myth. We will become the ancients to the next generation of observers, the ones who saw the light and didn't know what to do with it. We are the keepers of a story that has no resolution, a narrative that ends with a question mark carved into the very fabric of space-time. Unfortunate timing for our desire for closure. Those 2 words, final answer, doing a lot of work to hide the fact that the universe has no obligation to make sense to us. In the mythology of the Great Silence, there is a concept of the empty throne, a place reserved for the Creator who has wandered off to tend to other gardens. As we look at the empty spot in the Pegasus void where the object was last seen, we are looking at that throne. We are the stewards of a world that is currently between visits. The warning that was missed was never about a threat to our lives, it was a threat to our certainty. We can no longer believe that we are the masters of our destiny, but we can take comfort in the fact that we are part of a destiny that is far larger and more deliberate than we ever imagined. The cosmic perspective is not one of fear, but of a heavy, calm awe. We are a single note in a symphony that takes thousands of years to play a single chord. The National Reconnaissance Office will keep its secrets, and the Harvard scientists will return to their probability models. But you, the listener, the dreamer, you know the truth. You have felt the vibration in the floor and the pressure in your chest. You have seen the indigo light in your mind's eye. You understand that the universe is not a playground of random rocks, but a structured, calibrated archive of memory and intent. The object is gone, but it has left a window open in our awareness. We can see further now. We can feel the cold, rhythmic pulse of the interstellar dark, and it doesn't feel cold anymore. It feels like home. Imagine the researchers in the year 5626 looking through their own high-cadence data streams and seeing a point of light moving against the stars. They will find our records, our digital fingerprints, and our frantic updates to the probability models. They will wonder how we felt when we realized we were being measured. They will wonder if we were afraid or if we were simply tired, and they will wait, just as we are waiting, for the tumblers to click and the door to open once again. We are the bridges between the transits, the temporary guardians of the signal. The irony of the choice illusion is that our only real choice is how we spend the silence. We can spend it in fear, or we can spend it in preparation. We can spend it arguing over the data, or we can spend it looking at the stars with a new kind of reverence. 3. India, Atlas, has shown us that the universe is a place of infinite patience and absolute precision. It doesn't rush, and it doesn't stumble, it simply is. And as we drift with the orbit of tomorrow, we are invited to share in that stillness. We are invited to let go of the noise of our small world and listen to the music of the spheres, even if the music is just a low-frequency hum in the back of our minds. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of the earth beneath you and the height of the sky above you. The guest has gone, but the house is still standing. The fire is still burning. And the conversation will resume in its own time, according to its own geometry. Until then, we have the tale of the light that moved like a thought across the dark. We have the memories of July 2025 and February 2026, and we have the orbit of tomorrow carrying us forward into a future that is already written in the stars. The great silence is finally speaking, and the only thing left to do is listen. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow.